Olivia stepped into the creaking old house, the weight of grief heavy on her shoulders. The police had closed the case on her sister's murder too quickly, leaving too many unanswered questions. Now, as the sole heir, she had to sort through the remnants of her sister's life. A task that felt like sifting through shattered glass. The air was thick with dust and the faint scent of lavender, her sister's favorite. It was almost as if the house itself was holding its breath. As she unpacked in the dimly lit bedroom, the first whisper came. A breathy murmur that slithered through the floorboards from above. Olivia froze, her pulse quickening. Just the wind, she told herself, though the windows were shut tight. The attic had always been off limits when they were children, their parents dismissing it as unsafe. Now, as she climbed the narrow staircase, the wood groaned beneath her feet like a warning. The attic was a labyrinth of forgotten things, boxes of yellowed photographs, moth-eaten dresses, and a child's rocking horse with one broken leg. Then, the footsteps began, soft at first then deliberate, pacing just beyond the stacks of clutter. Olivia's breath hitched as a cold draft coiled around her ankles. She turned, her flashlight flickering, and caught a glimpse of a shadow. Tall, gaunt, with hollow eyes that seemed to drink in the light. Edgar. The name surfaced in her mind like a poisoned memory. She didn't know how she knew it, but it felt undeniable. The shadow vanished, leaving only the oppressive silence. That night as she lay in bed, the whispers returned, this time closer. They curled into her ear, a rasping promise. She didn't scream long enough. Olivia's blood turned to ice. The house wasn't just haunted, it was hungry. And Edgar had chosen his next victim. Olivia had always considered herself rational, someone who trusted what she could see and touch. But the longer she stayed in the old house, the harder it became to dismiss the inexplicable. It began subtly, a book falling from a shelf with no draft, a door creaking open when she was certain she'd closed it. Then came the whispers, just beyond hearing, like muffled voices drifting down from the attic. She told herself it was the wind, the settling of the old structure, anything but what her instincts screamed it was. Then she felt it, an icy brush against her neck, so sharp it made her gasp. She spun around, heart pounding, but the room was empty. The cold lingered on her skin like a phantom touch. That night, as she sorted through her sister's belongings, a framed photo suddenly slid across the dresser and shattered on the floor. The glass splintered around an image of the two of them, smiling, oblivious to the horror that would come. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she knelt to clean up the mess. That was when she noticed the handprints, small, smudged, as if someone had leaned on the dusty surface. But they were too large to be hers. And they trailed toward the hallway, vanishing into the shadows. The house seemed to breathe around her, the walls throbbing with a presence that wasn't hers. Olivia's reflection in the mirror flickered for a moment, warping into something gaunt and hollow-eyed before snapping back. She stumbled away, gripping the edge of the dresser until her knuckles turned white. Every night, the whispers grew louder, the cold more biting. She woke with bruises she couldn't explain, the scent of damp earth clinging to her sheets. Edgar was growing stronger, and he was hungry. Olivia knelt beside her sister's old wooden desk, her fingers brushing against the dust-covered surface. The room still smelled faintly of her sister's perfume, a bittersweet reminder of the life that had been stolen. As she pulled open the bottom drawer, her heart skipped a beat. Tucked beneath a stack of faded letters was a small, leather-bound diary, its edges worn with time. The moment she lifted it, a chill ran down her spine, as though the air itself had grown heavier. The first few pages were filled with mundane details, grocery lists, reminders, the occasional doodle. But as Olivia flipped further, the entries grew darker. Her sister's handwriting became jagged, frantic. "He's watching me again," one entry read. "I see him in the corners of the room, a shadow with hollow eyes. He never blinks. He just stares." Olivia's breath caught in her throat. She had assumed her sister's death was the work of a random intruder, but this was something else. This was personal. The final entry was the most unsettling. "I hear him in the attic, the scratching, the whispering. He's coming for me tonight. I can feel it. If I don't make it, Olivia, please, don't come back here. He's not done." The words were smudged as if written in haste or through tears. Olivia's hands trembled as she traced the desperate strokes of the pen. Then, as if summoned by the diary's revelation, a cold draft swept through the room. The pages fluttered on their own, stopping on an earlier entry Olivia had missed. A name, Edgar, scrawled in jagged letters, followed by a description of a man who had lived in the house decades ago. A man accused of unspeakable crimes, whose body was never found. The diary slipped from Olivia's grasp as the realization hit her: the shadow in the attic wasn't just a ghost. It was a predator, and now it knew she was reading its secrets. Olivia sat at the old oak desk in the study, the dim glow of her laptop casting eerie shadows across the yellowed newspapers and dusty ledgers she had pulled from the town archives. The house groaned around her, as if resisting her investigation. She typed in another search, her fingers trembling as she cross-referenced dates and names. The deeper she dug, the clearer the pattern became: decades of unsolved murders, all tied to this house. Each victim had been found in the attic, their throats slit in the same precise, almost ritualistic manner. The details were gruesome: blood pooled beneath their bodies, their faces frozen in terror. The police had never found any evidence of forced entry, no fingerprints, no signs of a struggle. It was as if the killer had simply vanished into thin air. A chill ran down Olivia's spine as she stumbled upon an old newspaper clipping from the 1920s. The headline read, "Local doctor missing after wife's brutal slaying." The accompanying photo showed a man with hollow eyes and a cold smile, Edgar. The article described how he had been the prime suspect in his wife's murder, but disappeared before the police could arrest him. Rumors swirled that he had hidden in the attic, driven mad by guilt or something darker. Olivia's breath hitched as she realized Edgar had never left. The house had claimed him, binding his spirit to its walls, fueling his hunger for violence. She leaned back in the creaking chair, her pulse racing. The whispers she'd heard, the footsteps above her. It was all connected. Edgar wasn't just haunting her, he was repeating his crimes through the years, trapping his victims in an unending cycle of fear. The diary's description of a shadowy figure with hollow eyes now made horrifying sense. Olivia clenched her fists, resolve hardening. If Edgar's spirit was tied to the house by his insatiable bloodlust, then breaking that cycle would require more than just fleeing. She would have to face him, and the darkness that had festered in this house for nearly a century. The attic beckoned, its secrets still waiting to be uncovered. Olivia stood before the bathroom mirror, splashing cold water on her face in an attempt to shake off the exhaustion that clung to her like a second skin. The flickering light above hummed softly, casting uneven shadows across the porcelain sink. She glanced up and her breath caught in her throat. The reflection staring back wasn't hers. A gaunt face with hollow, sunken eyes and a mouth stretched into a grotesque smile leered at her. Edgar. His presence was undeniable now, no longer hidden in whispers or fleeting touches. His twisted grin widened, as if amused by her terror. She stumbled back, her heart hammering against her ribs. The mirror fogged over, but his image remained clear, his fingers pressing against the glass like he might push through at any moment. A whisper slithered into her mind, faint but unmistakable: "Come to the attic." The words dripped with a hunger that made her stomach twist. Olivia's hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the sink, her knuckles white. She knew what waited up there. The diary had told her enough. Her sister's final moments, the shadow that had stalked her, the way she had pleaded for help before the silence swallowed her screams. But Edgar didn't just want her fear. He wanted her there, in that rotting attic, where the air smelled of damp wood and old blood. Olivia's reflection finally reappeared, but his presence lingered in the way the shadows clung to the corners of the room, in the chill that raised goosebumps on her skin. She wiped the mirror clean with a shaking hand, but his hollow eyes still burned in her mind. He was calling her. And the worst part, she could feel herself being pulled toward the answer, toward the darkness that had taken her sister. The attic door seemed to creak on its own, just loud enough to hear. Olivia's grip on reality was slipping like sand through her fingers. Every creak of the floorboards, every faint whisper in the dead of night, sent shivers down her spine. Edgar's presence was no longer just a shadow in the corner of her eye. It was a suffocating weight, pressing down on her chest. Sleep had become a distant memory, replaced by the relentless sound of ragged breathing, too close to her ear, though she was utterly alone. The air in the house grew thick, every breath tasting of dust and decay, as if the walls themselves were rotting from the inside out. Then came the voice, her sister's voice, calling her name from the attic. Soft at first, a ghostly murmur, then louder, desperate. "Of Olivia, help me please." The sound clawed at her heart. Was it really Emma, trapped in some limbo, or was it Edgar, toying with her grief like a predator circling its prey? The uncertainty gnawed at her. She'd seen his reflection in the mirror, those hollow eyes gleaming with malice. He was cruel, and he loved to play games. On the third night, Olivia couldn't resist. She stood at the foot of the attic stairs, her pulse thundering in her ears. The door creaked open on its own, revealing the yawning darkness above. "Come to me," the voice pleaded. But beneath the sweetness, there was something off. Guttural undertone, a hint of hunger. Olivia's hands trembled as she clutched the banister. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but the need to know, to see, was too strong. She took the first step, the wood groaning beneath her weight. The air grew colder, thicker. Something waited for her up there, something eager, and then laughter, soft mocking, not Emma's, Edgar's. Olivia froze, her blood turning to ice. The voice changed, twisting into something monstrous. "You were always the weaker sister," it sneered. The trap was set. The question was, would she be brave enough to spring it, or would she lose herself to the madness first? The air in the attic was thick with the scent of mildew and something metallic, something old and rotten. Olivia clutched her sister's diary in one hand, her fingers trembling, while the other gripped a rusted iron poker she'd found in the fireplace downstairs. The wooden beams above groaned as if the house itself were alive, protesting the unnatural presence that had festered within its walls for decades. Shadows writhed in the corners, coalescing into the vague shape of a man, Edgar. His hollow eyes burned with a hunger that made her stomach twist. "You don't belong here," Olivia whispered, her voice barely audible over the whispering wind that seemed to come from nowhere. Edgar's laughter echoed, a sound like nails scraping against bone. The walls trembled, and the floorboards beneath her feet shifted as if something were trying to push its way up from below. She stumbled back, nearly losing her balance, but forced herself to stand firm. The diary's final pages had hinted at the truth. Edgar wasn't just a ghost, he was a parasite, feeding on the fear and despair of those who dwelled in the house. A cold hand brushed against her neck, and Olivia gasped, whirling around to face nothing. Her reflection in the dusty attic mirror flickered, revealing Edgar's grotesque grin where her own face should have been. "You can't run," his voice slithered into her mind. "You're just like her, just like all of them." Olivia's breath came in ragged bursts as she realized the horrifying truth. Edgar wasn't just haunting the house, he was part of it. And the only way to destroy him was to confront the darkness that had taken root inside her own heart. Tears blurred her vision as she whispered her sister's name, clutching the diary to her chest. The attic grew deathly silent. Then, with a scream that tore from the depths of her soul, Olivia turned the iron poker toward herself, not to strike, but to face the terror within. The shadows shrieked, the house shook, and for a moment, she felt Edgar's fury as he was ripped away, his grip on the world dissolving. The attic fell still, but as Olivia collapsed to her knees, she couldn't shake the feeling that something still watched from the darkness, waiting.